Today, for our supporter spotlight, we have Arlene Kelly. Arlene has been a supporter of Mercy Neighborhood Ministries since 2010, and she is a lifelong Germantown resident. So we've just met this year via Zoom, although we've spoken a few times over the years. Arlene, it's a pleasure to have you. And my first question is, how did you get involved and learn about Mercy Neighborhood Ministries?
Okay, great, good. Thank you, Stephen. It's good to be here. Actually, the full credit for my becoming involved goes to Leah Chaplin, who is a member of your board, and I think still, I know, a very, very strong supporter, she and her partner, of Mercy Neighborhood, and she is a friend of, they are friends of ours. And she just was speaking when we were out at dinner, I'm sure. I don't remember exactly, but she spoke of it, and I'm not recalling whether it was, to be honest, whether she just spoke of it or whether there was an upcoming event. I know that one time, one of your events was, I think the Trolley Diner in Chestnut Hill was supporting. So, but I learned of it through Leah, and then became a contributor, a small contributor, and just really have stayed connected and have come to know it increasingly and really respect the work that that Mercy Neighborhood is doing. And so I think the question of why do I stay involved, or how have I gotten somewhat more involved? And it is just really out of that that I try to pay a lot of attention with contributions that I make financially. I'm at an age where a lot of what I do is more limited in physical activity, and but is tied into really paying attention and trying to make good use of financial resources that I have. And so to me, it means a lot to, I want to pay attention to where I contribute my money and do the best I can in ensuring that it goes to places that are having an impact.
Thank you. That's great to hear. And what specifically about our work has inspired you to stay involved?
There's something, and it was reinforced by the open house, my attendance at that you had several months ago, a few months ago. I think some of it is subtle. I was commenting to you just when we started about wondering about your location, because many organizations and agencies don't have green walls. And so I think you can tell something about an organization by the way it is decorated and kept up, in terms of whether it shows respect for the people who are participating there. So that's one small sign, and I was very impressed with the care that had gone into creating a welcoming atmosphere. But I think more importantly, as I heard the staff speak that day, and as I have some sense of your programs, the thing that matters most to me is what I sense to be the respect and the caring, yes, and also respect that you have for your clients. And again, this is stretching. I don't know that this was said, but what comes across is just relating to them as people who you want to partner with and make a contribution to, in terms of providing opportunity, as opposed to what would be a more old-fashioned kind of paternalistic view of doing good. And so I think it's just something that comes through. And obviously also then I had a sense with what Sister Ann was saying of really trying to be attentive to what all of you hear from the people whom you're serving in regard to their needs, and what is it, I think letting the voice of the people on whose behalf you're working and exist to listen to their voice in terms of what their needs are and what will be helpful.
Thank you for that. And that's very true. I'm glad that sticks out to you, the mutual respect for the family, the neighbors that come to our services, and the inclusion that we pride ourselves on, of not being just something that popped up in a neighborhood that we knew needed our services, but that we were able to engage folks. And since the beginning, all of the creations of our programs have stemmed from the needs and the suggestions of our neighbors, and that's been very important throughout our history. You kind of spoke to this in your last answer, but what is your philosophy around philanthropy, and how do you see it as a way to solve issues in our city and in society at large?
It's a subject to which I've been giving a fair amount of thought over the last, it's become increasingly over the last few years a subject of interest and importance to me, partly as I've read and with some larger, maybe more international organizations, reading about how even at times how an intention to do good retrospectively does not always feel good, or it does not accomplish good. I can, not to stray too far afield, but I remember it's probably been 15 or 20 years ago. I was on the board of the American Friends Service Committee, and one of its well-known programs was to collect clothes and distribute them in developing countries. And they came to the place of ending that program, recommending its ending, because they realized that it was not helpful. And it wasn't helpful because what it tended to do, there had been a time probably when it was helpful, but recognizing that it was suppressing the development of small businesses in the countries where the clothes were being sent. And that if the clothes weren't sent, it was better to support people. I guess it's that old thing of, whether you give somebody a fish or a fishing rod, giving them clothes or giving them a sewing machine. How are people empowered? I became, much more conscious of how philanthropy can be used, hopefully, to empower people rather than just serving to make the people who give money feel good. And I've extended that. So I did speak to this a little bit in what I've already said, that it matters to me that Mercy Neighborhood listens to the people whom it's serving and tries to tailor services in a way which is responsive to what people identify as a need and identify as helpful. That matters a lot to me because I think it not only has to do with the use of money, it has to do with really with the building of the kind of society for which I long, and I think many people long, and that is where we recognize that people definitely are equal, and that I suspect you've had the experience, I've had it over the years. I suspect you and Sister Ann and the others there have had the experience of having the people with whom you work and with whom you partner to be your teachers, to learn things that we learn from them. And so how do we create and how do we use our resources to, in the direction of creating a world that models what we want, not only of having a more fair distribution of resources, but models and puts into practice building relationships among people that make a difference. And I have further extended this thinking in the last year or so to look into the subject of, I guess, what is in philanthropy now called impact investing, and not only how do you make use of your money that it is, I mean, that's shifting more to investing, I guess, as opposed to philanthropy, but how do you make use of your money in a way that it is having an impact? And I realize I'm straying somewhat from it, but I mean, the whole notion of the gap in wealth within this country, and the place that the use of resources of people who have more wealth, the use to which money is put, and often extra money goes into the stock market, and coming to the place of feeling that instead of investing money in the stock market, to use it for philanthropy, but also to think about how that gap may be closed somewhat by being able to make use of money more directly. I'm not saying that clearly, but I think to have a redistribution of wealth so that people who are right now outside of discriminated against in terms of being able to really even accumulate enough to live standard lives, to make it more possible for them to be able to be part of the picture. So let me stop there because I'm quite far afield.
Yeah, I agree with you. I wouldn't work in this field if I didn't believe in that redistribution. As you mentioned, that's kind of my whole job, right? But I think also what you spoke to is what people want to invest in is opportunity. Impact investing is that, and then this kind of leads to my next question. It's a question of access, and how do we, those of us who are fortunate enough to be able to give back, how do we get involved to create that access for folks with the respect that we about earlier? And if anything, the past year and a half now through COVID, we've seen the inequities in society right up front. And I think it certainly last year caused more people to be generous. It put an eye on nonprofits and nonprofits doing great work and the effects that they had in the community. But my question for you to that point, what changes and challenges do you see in a post-COVID world for nonprofits, for those that you support or that you pay attention to most?
I think, I mean, certainly the two main things, and I suspect they may be what pop into many minds. The two things that I see to be the challenges in our society, and thus for the nonprofits, is the challenge of racism, and also the challenge, as you were saying, of the distribution of wealth. I saw a chart the other day, I don't think I'm misspeaking, where it was charting over the last several years the wealth gap between the highest and the lowest. And in the last couple of years, it has that the resources of those in the those of us who are in the among those who have resources, that gap has widened significantly. And so how to address that, how to a question that I would have for nonprofits for Mercy Neighborhood is whether there is a place or not, but whether there's a place for services in addition to what you're doing, which I think there's nothing that I think you should put aside that I'm aware of. But I mean, for example, of whether there would be a way in which, let's say, some of your contributors, if they were willing to contribute additionally to, let's say, a special fund, that if you have some clients who are on the, at that point where that final kind of leg up would be really helpful, where they are prepared to, let's say, own a house where they could manage a mortgage, et cetera, but cannot presumably manage a down payment or whatever. Whether there's a place for an organization like Mercy Neighborhood to make it possible for your contributors to contribute to such a fund to which your clients could make application. The thing that I'm not aware of, and I want to acknowledge this, excuse me, as my not yet knowing, is if you were to say, we don't need to do that because that exists in the community. I was very struck with, in the open house of, and with your question, what's the next thing? What is the next challenge? And I heard that question asked by, maybe not in those words, by Sister Anne. And so I'm a person who's always looking for what's the next opportunity, taking what you have as very solid foundation and very important. What's the next opportunity up? And is there anything? Let me stop there because I don't know if I'm saying that clearly or not.
I think I get the question, and these are things that we've thought about as well. We expanded a few years ago to offer more pre-K services, but on the bigger scheme of things, there's always been discussion around whether or not we could open a school, not just preschool, but move into kindergarten. And I'm saying that people are listening, and so I don't. That's not anything that's that's even in an official plan. But there's always been discussion about that because of the lacking educational resources in the community, especially since public schools. We only have one public school in the community, and the numbers for children are always rising. If you look at the population of Tioga, Nicetown, or even I think North Philly as a whole over the past 20 years, population has declined, but the ages of, I believe, under 5 and over 60 continue to increase.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of hits the services, the primary services that we offer to touch those age groups. There's also the issue of housing. More apartment buildings are being constructed in the area, or more, houses here are being converted into apartments. So the discussion of home ownership comes up, and how do we reinvest in the community that way? Is that something that, we would partner with an organization that would provide housing while we provided social services? The needs seem to be growing, and while there's a lot of grassroots efforts, and I'll still consider us in that bracket of grassroots, even though we've significantly grown as an organization, there's not really a large, that I'm aware of, cohesive effort. Everything's kind of done in silos. So I think if we start there, and all of the nonprofits coming together, I know our friends at Face to Face have put together like a Northwest Philly collaboration. And sometimes at those meetings, we have 30 different organizations represented, and you find out who's doing similar work, maybe half of them. So in that respect, I think the mindset is changing for nonprofits to ensure collaboration.
Mhm, mhm.
Also realize, and there's been a conversation on the funding side for the want to see that collaboration. I think you're more likely to be a financially successful nonprofit if you're working together with other nonprofits, whether it's behind the scenes or actually collaborating publicly with mergers and things like that. I hope that I think I kind of went on there too, but I think there are opportunities, and while the needs seem insurmountable, those of us doing this work just have to realize that there's different approaches, and none of this is impossible to do. It's already being done. It's just kind of, I guess, scaling up to meet the growing needs, and to bring the right people in to close that wealth gap. I think is the biggest issue, which stems from most of the other systemic injustices, whether it's racism and economic inequalities and homelessness. And there's just so many things that all tie back to the work that needs to be done by nonprofit organizations, and hopefully in collaboration with local government as well.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's really exciting with what you're describing, Steve. Just that of getting out of, I mean, my background is in social work, and having worked in social agencies and worked on some boards and in organizations, and getting out of our silos is so important. And so doing that collaboration, I think, is tremendously just that. I mean, I would say yes to that, and really encourage it as, and also what occurs to me is, and I'm sure you and others at Mercy Neighborhood face this all the time, of being able to keep in perspective the reality of you'll never meet all the need. You'll never meet all the need, but I think working to ensure that you meet the opportunity that is there in front of you. And I just have a deep belief that if we do that sort of thing, and that someday there will be a tipping point that comes, that as people are empowered, as you're empowering them, that as people are empowered to, and given the support they need to take charge of their own lives, that there will come a point, and where people realize that that the way in which we're living in our world is not working. I know there are plenty of forces on the side of continuing it, but so I just want to say I really congratulate you and others at Mercy Neighborhood. And I don't want to sound like a commercial announcement, but I guess what I say to people is that I don't say that to people unless I mean it. And so, I mean, I think it's terrific.
I appreciate that. And my next question, or last question, was almost leading toward a commercial announcement, but you kind of said it all. Is there anything else that you would say to individuals as to why they should support an organization like Mercy Neighborhood Ministries?
I think I would really basically sum up some of what I've said, that, I mean, depending on what your values are, but if your values are that the people are not seen, people being with whom you are partnering are not being seen as lesser, people so needy, and that you're doing them a favor, but where people are really respected and empowered, if that's part of one's value system, then I think that certainly I would say Mercy Neighborhood, from all that I know, is doing that. And so I would recommend it on that basis. I think the location in the city, you were just alluding to some of the analysis that you do of the neighborhood, looking to where the need is, looking to what is the best use of your resources. And I think for an organization that applies its resources that it knows are not going to meet all of the need, but to apply those in a way which is most effective is another, I think, signpost of an organization to which I want to give, where I feel that my contribution is serving to leverage as much as can be leveraged with the money. So those would be some of the reasons, and I felt, I mean, this is maybe it's a small thing, but certainly in the Zoom call and the virtual visit, just the sense of the relationship among the people on the staff who were there present in that meeting, and the fact that you said you've been there 7 years, it says something about an organization. When you sense the commitment of the people working there to the work of the organization. So all of those are signposts, I guess, if I were going to write an article about things you should watch for in making good use of your money. Those would be things that I would identify. So I would very much encourage, if somebody is thinking of contributing or has the possibility of contributing more, that if one, and again, something at which I look is the distribution of my resources, both locally in the Philadelphia area and then on a wider way. So in terms of organizations in the city of Philadelphia, obviously there are many good organizations, but Mercy Neighborhood, I think, is definitely among those that is making a difference.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And thank you for your time today.
Okay, well, thank you. And